right, downtown Detroit, going to the International North American Auto Show here in Detroit. Same day, got done working on fence. This is the first Detroit, transit police. First cop I've seen. And we've been driving for miles on
Well, if you were a cop, would you come down here?
So a lot of parts of Detroit are not as bad as what you would think. We actually rebuilt a lot of the city. And we haven't drove through, right? We've been driving right through, started at the north end of the city, working our way to the Detroit River. So we've been on miles on this. You see boarded up houses and stuff when we've gone through, neighborhoods off to the side of Woodward. But down here, you don't see that stuff. The downtown area is enormous. It's a big area.
University of Michigan.
So, yeah, I never felt unsafe really coming down here. But, of course, I'm definitely carrying. It's Detroit after all. Beautiful fall day. It's cold down here now. It's in the 50s, gonna be in the 30s tonight.
Another view.
No, we won't park at Cobo Hall. We'll just find one of those pay-to-park parking lots.
Oh yeah, that's a lot
Those buildings across there are Windsor, Ontario, Canada. So the river, Detroit River's right there in front of us.
These are beautiful buildings. They're just gorgeous. Looks like a
Okay, GM headquarters, world headquarters. All right, leaving the auto show, heading out of Detroit. Pretty uneventful. The auto show they had some outdoor stuff, monster truck stuff, but the rest of it just seemed like, it just seemed like going to a big auto dealership and walking around their lot. Jeep and Ford had some pretty cool displays, climbing and descending some big inclines with their vehicles and indoors. Yeah, I guess Ram truck. But other than that, we're heading out of Detroit, heading back home. Well, at the auto show, there's so the Detroit Auto Show, some of it was outdoors in a public park down on the riverfront at Hart Plaza. And they made you go through a metal detector to get into the park. And the lady says, empty your pockets. So I had keys in my pocket. She said, you got any weapons on you? I said, yeah, I got my gun on me. She says, well, you can't have any guns in here. I'm going to have it confiscated. I said, you ain't taking my gun. So I left. And I'm like, so stop and ask Detroit cop. I go, what's the deal with no guns in Hart Plaza? I said, that's public property. And in Michigan, we do not have preemption like in some other states, meaning local authorities cannot pass an ordinance or a law that supersedes state law, because when we became shall issue for concealed carry back in 2001, there were all these anti-gun municipalities that said, oh, you can't carry a gun on city property and such. Well, they're not allowed to do that. If it's public property, private property, if you have a private property or business, you have every right to say nobody can carry guns on my property. But, it's one of those deals where I think if you went to court, if you got a ticket and went to court, you'd probably win in court. But it's like, who wants to represent themselves? I mean, who wants to pay for the representation in court? The deal was, that one Detroit cop I talked to, they were all for, like, citizens carrying. Because actually, there's a lot of the citizenry, the law-abiding citizenry in Detroit carries, because in that culture, it's a way of life carrying a gun. I mean, it's heavily used and advised in some neighborhoods in Detroit. Although downtown Detroit, it was completely safe. There were Detroit cops everywhere. It's not like I would have needed to carry a gun. So I took the gun back to my car, and I was with my mother, and I didn't feel like I needed to carry it. I would have liked it when I went back to the parking garage after dark, but even then, we were still downtown. There was a lot of people. I didn't feel unsafe, but that's probably where you would get, if you're going to get mugged or robbed, it would have been going back to your car in a parking garage. But, you know, it's one of those deals. The Detroit cops said, well, it's a safety thing because there was a couple, like 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big shooting at Hart Plaza. And, you know, it's gangbangers roll in there and they start shooting at another gangbanger. Then, of course, there's ancillary damage. They shoot innocent bystanders because they don't care about anybody's life, you know. And I said, well, I understand that, but that doesn't trump the law. That's not what I'm talking about. But I just tried to ask the cop, has anybody been ticketed and it's held up in court? And the cop said, well, no, we've never ticketed anybody and we've never heard of that. But there's something about, because it was the auto show and the auto show was leasing out public property to have part of the auto show there. But I still don't think they could do that. But anyways, in Michigan, public property, you're allowed to carry a gun. Except like schools, universities can make their own rules, I guess, for some stupid reason. Can't carry into sporting arena. Places with seating capacity, you know, that seat several thousand people, like a stadium or concert, you're not allowed to carry. But there's a couple other exceptions to that. But anyways, it was a good trip down to Detroit. Curious what your concealed carry laws are in your state. You know, back in the old days, we'd have like it depended what county you lived in on who got a permit. And I had a permit back in the 90s. And then 2001, we became shall issue, which meant the state came in and said all these counties, if the applicant meets minimum criteria standards, you have to issue them. You shall issue them a permit. You know, not like the corrupt good old boys club like it was years ago, where, you know, politicians, judges, people like that were getting permits. And depending on what county you lived in and all that. But what do they like where you live?